The golden morning sun spilled through the wide glass windows of the Grand Orchid Hotel, scattering light across the polished marble floors like shards of hope. In Suite 902, Maya Roberts sat before a vanity table, her reflection framed by curling, white roses and satin ribbons. The air was thick with the delicate scent of peonies, and her wedding gown, a breathtaking cascade of silk and lace, hung near the window like a promise suspended in time. Her hands trembled as she adjusted a pair of pearl earrings, an heirloom from her late mother, telling herself that today nothing could go wrong. This was supposed to be the day her life began anew, the day she became Mrs. Maya Whitmore, wife to Ethan Whitmore, the city's most charming young philanthropist. Ethan had seemed like the man every woman dreamed of, kind, charismatic, endlessly generous. He had whisked her away on surprise trips, spoken to her in ways that made her feel like the center of the universe, and promised her a life filled with love and adventure. But beyond the champagne toasts and candlelit dinners, there had been whispers, ugly, persistent whispers. People in the community, even a few in her inner circle, had quietly hinted that Ethan was far closer to Reverend Caleb, their church leader, than was appropriate for two men supposedly bound only by faith. Maya had laughed them off. In her mind, it was impossible. Ethan was affectionate, attentive, and had been nothing but devoted during their engagement. Why should she believe gossip, especially on a day like this? Her best friend Serena, however, hadn't been so easily convinced. Just last week over coffee, Serena had leaned in and whispered, "Maya, I don't want to ruin your happiness, but I think Ethan's hiding something, and it's not about another woman." The words had unsettled her, but she'd brushed them aside. Serena had been through a messy breakup herself. Maybe she was projecting her own distrust onto Maya's relationship. Now, sitting there with her bridal makeup still being perfected, Maya tried to push away the memory of that conversation. She focused on her reflection, telling herself she looked beautiful, telling herself that after today she would be a wife, a partner, and perhaps soon, a mother. Her phone buzzed on the table, breaking her fragile calm. It was a voice message from Ethan. She tapped to play it, and his warm, reassuring tone filled the air. "My love, I can't wait to see you walking down that aisle. After today, it's just us. No noise, no rumors, just our life together. I've booked us a month in Santorini, private villa, just the two of us. Ignore anything you might hear today. People are jealous, that's all. Don't let them steal this moment from us. I love you, Maya. You're my forever." Her lips curled into a faint smile, but her heart didn't warm the way it usually did when she heard his voice. It was that one line, "Ignore anything you might hear today," that lodged like a thorn in her mind. Why would he say that on their wedding day? What exactly did he think she might hear? Before she could dwell on it, the door swung open, and Serena stepped inside in her lavender bridesmaid dress, holding 2 coffee cups. "Queen of the day," Serena said with a grin that didn't quite reach her eyes. "How's the bride feeling?" "Nervous." "Excited," Maya replied, forcing cheer into her voice. Serena handed her a coffee, then sat on the edge of the bed, her tone softening. "Maya, I need you to promise me something. If anything feels off today, if you sense something's wrong, don't ignore it, even if it hurts." Maya arched a brow. "You're not starting with the warnings again, are you?" Serena's gaze was steady. "I just don't want you to regret walking into something you can't walk out of." Maya sighed. "Serena, I love him. I trust him. Can we please just enjoy today?" Serena didn't argue, but the tension in her shoulders didn't ease. It was then that Maya's phone lit up with a number she didn't recognize. She hesitated, then answered. A low, steady woman's voice came through the line, urgent and cold. "If you want the truth about Ethan Whitmore, go to Rosewood Tower, Suite 614. Right now. Don't tell anyone. Just go. You'll understand." And then the call ended. Maya's pulse spiked. She stared at the phone, her mind racing. Serena noticed immediately. "Who was that?" Maya swallowed. "Wrong number." She set the phone down too quickly, hoping the conversation would end there. But the voice lingered in her head like an echo. "Go to Rosewood Tower. You'll understand." A war raged inside her chest. Part of her wanted to laugh it off. Surely this was a prank or someone with a grudge. But another part of her, the quiet, fearful part, was already standing up, reaching for her purse. Without another word, she told Serena she needed fresh air and slipped out of the suite, her veil trailing behind her like a ghost. The hotel lobby blurred past as she walked briskly to the street, flagging down the first taxi she saw. Her heart pounded with each passing block, the morning sunshine now feeling harsh, almost cruel. She told herself she was being ridiculous, that she'd arrive at Rosewood Tower and find nothing. But deep down, in the part of her heart she'd been trying to silence for weeks, Maya knew, today was not going to be the day she dreamed of. She walked out. The corridor yawned, quiet and almost compassionate in its lack of protest. In the elevator, her reflection looked both older and more honest. She let out a breath she felt she'd been holding since the phone rang at the Grand Orchid. When the doors opened into the lobby, she caught the receptionist watching her with a small, worried crease between her brows. Maya nodded to the woman, just a tiny nod that said, "I'm all right enough to walk." Outside, the wind had shifted. Clouds shouldered the sun aside, and noon dimmed. Maya stood on the sidewalk and called Serena. The moment her friend picked up, Maya's voice, which had stayed steady through the impossible, finally trembled. "I need you," she said simply. "I'm downstairs," Serena answered. "I followed you. Turn left." Maya did. And there Serena was by a bakery window, hair coming loose, eyes wide with the kind of loyalty that does not ask for maps. Serena didn't speak. She just opened her arms, and Maya stepped into them and let herself shake. Not the pretty tremor of nerves, but the deep, seismic shudder of a foundation cracking and refusing to collapse. People moved around them. A bus sighed. Somewhere a dog barked at a bird it had no chance of catching. Life, indifferent and generous, kept happening. When the shaking subsided, Serena kept one hand on Maya's shoulder, steady as a dock post. "Tell me exactly what you need," she said. "I need to breathe without lying to myself," Maya said. "I need to make a choice that won't look pretty in photographs but will look right in a mirror. And before any of that, I need to walk." So, they walked. They went 3 blocks in silence, then another 3 with the kind of small talk people use to keep the ground from tilting. Whether a boy in a red cape leaping from planter to planter, a woman selling dahlias with dirt still under her nails. At the 7th block, Maya stopped and laughed, a short, astonished burst, because there, in a boutique window, was a mannequin in a white dress, and pinned to its bodice was a card that read, "Returns accepted within 30 days. On brand," Serena said, and they both laughed again because sometimes you must. The laughter made room for words. Maya told her everything, not in lurid detail, not in anger's favorite hyperbole, but in clean, spare sentences that made the truth neither bigger nor smaller than it was. Serena listened the way good friends listen, shoulders square, eyes soft, mouth set in a line that said, "I'm here. Keep going." When Maya finished, Serena spoke the sentence that had been waiting, patient and ready. "You don't have to marry him to be kind. You don't have to sacrifice yourself to be compassionate." She squeezed Maya's hand. "You can choose dignity and still choose mercy?" Maya nodded. The clouds above them had thinned to gauze, and a quiet silver light fell over the sidewalk. Somewhere far away, bells marked the hour, an hour that, by anyone else's plan, should have been hers in a white aisle with strings playing. Instead, it was hers here, with a friend, with truth. with breath. She straightened. "We're going. Back," she said. "To the Grand Orchid. I'll tell my father first, then I'll tell our guests, then I'll tell Ethan." "Do you want me with you?" Serena asked. "Yes," Maya said, "because strength does not diminish by sharing." They turned toward a cab stand. As they stepped off the curb, Maya glanced at the ring on her finger, not with contempt, not with yearning, but with a tenderness for the version of herself who had received it. "You did not fail," she told that girl. "You learned." And then, aloud, "To no one and to God and to the stubborn world all at once," she added, "storms don't get to rename me." The cab door thumped shut. The city wheeled again, and they moved through it, toward a decision, toward a room full of flowers, toward a microphone that would make her voice larger than her fear. She didn't know what words would come yet, only that they would be true, and that would be enough for one impossible day. The taxi rolled to a stop before Rosewood Tower, a building of smoked glass and steel ribs that threw back the morning's sun like a shield. Maya paid the fare with fingers that didn't feel like hers, and stood there for a moment, clutching her purse, her veil bunched in her free hand. People moved around her in bright little streams, baristas carrying trays, a courier arguing into a headset, a couple laughing like the day belonged to them. She stood outside the revolving door, telling herself to turn around, telling herself she was being dramatic. But the unknown woman's voice ran like cold water down her spine. "Suite 614. You'll understand." Inside, the lobby hummed with air conditioning and low, expensive music. Maya approached the front desk with a careful smile. "I'm here to deliver something to a guest in 614, she said, lifting a small gift bag Serena had shoved into her hands earlier, a ring dish with forever painted in gold. The receptionist glanced at the bag, then at Maya's face, then at the veil in her hand, and for a second she looked as if she might ask a question. Instead, she nodded and said, "Elevators to your right." In the mirrored elevator, Maya met her own eyes and almost didn't recognize them. They looked brave and brittle at once. She thought of her mother, of the mornings they'd watch boats from the harbor rail, and her mother would say, "You don't control the wind, baby, but you can set your sails." She exhaled long and slow and pressed. 6. The hallway smelled faintly of lemons and carpet glue. Doors lined up like closed eyes. She found 614 at the far turn, where a window spilled a slice of unforgiving light onto the runner. Her hand hovered over the handle. This, she told herself, would be a silly story later. Remember when I rushed across town in my veil because a stranger called? She almost laughed. From inside came the muffled rise and fall of voices. One was Ethan's. She knew his timbre, the way words rolled soft and warm. The other voice was deeper, steadier, threaded with the calm authority of someone accustomed to being listened to. Reverend Caleb. The sound reached her not as a sentence, but as a knowing, as if her heart had learned a language her mind refused to speak. Her knuckles touched the wood, then withdrew. She tried to knock, couldn't. She tried to breathe. Could. Barely. In the end, her body made the choice her mind could not. Her fingers closed around the handle and turned. The door opened into a living room the size of her old apartment. Light poured through floor-to-ceiling panes, pooling over pale furniture, an open suitcase, a jacket tossed across a chair, Ethan's jacket. The voices were closer now, through the bedroom door ajar at the end of a short hallway. She stepped forward on bare feet, her heels held by two unsure fingers, her veil snagging on the corner of a console table and sliding off to the carpet with a whisper. She could have called out, "Ethan?" and given them time to rearrange, to assemble a harmless picture. She didn't. She pushed the bedroom door with the flat of her hand. The scene did not scream. It didn't need to. It was in the smallness of distance, the easy nearness of two bodies. The electric charge that hangs in a room where a line has been crossed and crossed again. Ethan spun first, eyes wide, face flushing so fast it made him look feverish. Reverend Caleb's hand lifted. Reflex, caution, something like fear and something like denial. No one spoke for 3 heartbeats. The air thickened. Maya's world went soundless and far away, like everything was behind glass. When sound returned, it came in Ethan's voice, her fiancé's voice, softened into pleading. "Maya, wait, please." The words fell between them like heavy, wet cloth. He reached instinctively toward her, then pulled back as if his fingers had touched a stove. "It's not—" He stopped because it was. Maya's mouth opened, but a voice did not come. What rose instead were pictures. Every date, every promise, every late-night prayer she'd whispered with Reverend Caleb standing 2 feet away, while Ethan squeezed her fingers in the pew. The way the Reverend had blessed. Their engagement with a smile that looked like light through stained glass. She saw it all at once and saw through it, like realizing a painting she loved had been hung over a hole in the wall. "Close the door," Reverend Caleb said very gently, as if requesting privacy could undo the truth. His face was composed, pastoral, an expression he probably used at hospital bedsides and funerals. "Maya, let us talk like adults." "Like adults," she repeated, and her voice sounded to her like frost. She did not close the door. She stepped forward and set the little gift bag on the dresser, the word forever peeking up over tissue paper like a joke that had forgotten its punchline. Ethan was the first to move. He reached for his shirt on the chair, fumbling, fighting, with buttons that would not align under shaking hands. "I should have told you," he said, the words tumbling and tripping. "I was going to. I thought after the wedding. Once it all was too late," she said, and her tone cut even though she did not raise it. Outside the window, the city continued without them, buses sighing to stops, pigeons flapping in loose, confused circles. "You invited truth into your future like a guest you planned to keep waiting in the lobby." He winced. "I love you, Maya. I swear I love you." "Love doesn't sneak," she said. "Love doesn't hide under titles someone hung on the wall." Reverend Caleb took a step forward, palms open. "Maya," he said in the patient voice of counseling sessions. "The heart is complicated. What you walked in on is not a mockery of your place in Ethan's life. It is treachery dressed in scripture," she answered, and watched surprise flicker through his composure. "You prayed over our engagement with the same mouth. You used to hush him." She looked at Ethan then, and her eyes softened despite themselves. He looked younger than he had this morning, like a boy in a jacket too big for him. She wondered briefly, absurdly, if he'd eaten breakfast. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said, and she believed him. In some cruel way, she believed him completely. He had not meant to. He had simply refused to choose truth when truth asked its price. The urge to break something rose in her throat, bright and metallic. Instead, she reached for the veil on the floor and folded it over her arm with meticulous care, the way she had folded sheets with her mother on Sunday afternoons. The tiny, ordinary motion steadied her in a room where nothing else would. "Here is what's going to happen," she said, and surprised herself with how level she sounded. "I am going to leave this room. I am going to walk back through that lobby and into the daylight, and I am going to decide whether the aisle waiting for me right now is a path to a life or a plank to a drowning. You," she nodded toward Ethan, "are going to say nothing to persuade me. You have spent all your words, and you," her gaze moved to the Reverend, "are going to stop using God like a curtain." Color rose in Reverend Caleb's cheeks. "You don't understand the history here." "Then teach me," she said, sudden heat flaring behind her sternum. Teach me why my faith has to be the rug you stand on while you keep your balance. Ethan's eyes filled, panic pressing his voice thin. Maya, please, if you leave now, everything will fall apart. The venue, our families, people will talk. Let them, she said. Rumor is a hungry animal. It will eat whether I feed it or not. But my soul, she touched her chest lightly. My soul is not an animal, and I won't starve it to keep a seating chart intact. Silence gathered, thick and close. Far below, a siren wound down and away. A soft click from the air vent sounded suddenly enormous. I should have told you, Ethan repeated, small and worn out, like a child confessing to a broken window. I thought I could be one kind of man in public and another kind in private, and that the better one would win if I just kept marching toward it. I was wrong. His shoulders buckled. I was a coward. Coward. The word did not land like an insult. It landed like a diagnosis. Maya thought of the people who would be standing in a church right now waiting for music. She pictured Serena's face, the determined tenderness there. She imagined her father's hands stuffed into his tuxedo pockets because he never knew what to do with his hands when he was worried. She felt, for a moment, the enormous weight of being a person inside a net of people. Then she felt something else, a clean, painful clarity. It didn't tell her the future. It only told her the next step. She lifted the gift bag again and tucked it into her purse. Forever disappeared. I don't hate you, she said, and surprised herself again by finding it true. I don't even know if I'll stop loving you. Love is stubborn that way. But I will not marry an arrangement. I will not marry a promise that asks me to play blind. Reverend Caleb folded his arms, a motion that felt, for the first time, defensive rather than pastoral. Do you realize what you're doing? Yes, she said. For the first time this morning. The Grand Orchid's entrance loomed ahead, all polished brass and mirrored glass. Maya could see her reflection as the cab slowed, veil slightly askew, curls loosening, the edges of her makeup softened by the walk and the wind. For a fleeting moment, she imagined stepping out and walking straight past the revolving doors, heading anywhere else. Another city, another life, a place where no one knew her name. But Serena's hand on hers was an anchor. She had made a choice in the cab, and choices meant walking toward the hard things, not away from them. Inside, the lobby buzzed with wedding day anticipation. Guests in jewel-toned dresses and crisp suits milled about, champagne glasses in hand, waiting for the ushers to open the doors to the ceremony hall. Some smiled at her as she passed, offering congratulations, completely unaware that every step she took was toward the end of something rather than the beginning. Her father was by the grand staircase, speaking to the event coordinator. His back was straight, his tuxedo immaculate, but when he saw Maya approach, the lines around his eyes deepened. Maya. His voice was low, uncertain. Dad, we need to talk. Now. The coordinator took one look at her face and excused herself. Her father's hand found her elbow, guiding her toward a quiet lounge off the lobby. He closed the door behind them, his expression a mixture of concern and confusion. What's happened? Are you feeling unwell? Maya didn't bother easing into it. I'm not marrying Ethan. His shoulders stiffened, but he didn't speak right away. Instead, he sat down slowly, his gaze fixed on her like a man reading the weather in the clouds. You've made up your mind? Yes. The word came out steady, though her heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. Why? His tone wasn't angry, just searching. Because I found out something today, something that makes it impossible for me to walk down that aisle and mean the vows I'd be speaking. It's not about cold feet or nerves, it's about truth. And I can't promise forever to a man who couldn't even give me honesty before we started. Her father exhaled, slow and deliberate. Do you want to tell me the details? Not yet, she said. Not because I don't trust you, but because right now, the details don't matter as much as the fact that I'm choosing not to betray myself. He studied her for a moment longer, then nodded once. All right. If that's your decision, I'll stand beside you when you tell them. All of them. Relief loosened something in her chest. She didn't realize how much she'd been bracing for resistance until she felt at ease. Thank you. They stepped back into the hallway together, Serena trailing just behind. The coordinator returned, her cheerful energy faltering when she caught the look in Maya's eyes. We're not proceeding, Maya told her gently but firmly. I'll explain to the guests myself. Word spread quickly through the staff, and within minutes, the murmuring in the ceremony hall had shifted from light anticipation to restless curiosity. Maya walked in through the side entrance, her father on one side, Serena on the other. All eyes turned toward her, and the room fell into a hush so complete she could hear the faint hum of the chandelier lights overhead. She walked to the center of the aisle, but there was no groom waiting at the altar. No string quartet swelled to announce her. She turned to face the rows of friends, family, and strangers, connected by nothing more than invitations printed in gold script. I know you came here today expecting to witness a wedding, she began, her voice steady, though her fingers were clenched around the small microphone the coordinator had handed her. And I want to thank you for coming, for dressing up, for showing love to me and until now, what you thought was my future. A ripple moved through the crowd, the rustle of fabric and quiet clearing of throats. She could feel dozens of eyes on her, some sympathetic, some already sharpening into judgment. But a marriage, she continued, isn't just about a ceremony. It's about truth. And today, I learned that the truth I believed in wasn't real. I will not stand here in a white dress and speak vows that would be built on a lie. I will not ask you to celebrate something that would crumble before it began. She let the silence settle after that, giving the words space to breathe. In the front row, Ethan's mother looked stunned, her hand pressed to her lips. A few guests exchanged confused glances, but no one spoke. I don't share this to embarrass anyone, Maya said finally. I share it because I believe there's no shame in walking away from what doesn't honor you, even if it means walking away in front of 100 people. I hope you'll understand. I hope someday he will too. She lowered the microphone and handed it back to the coordinator. Without another word, she turned and walked up the aisle, not toward a man waiting at the end, but toward the double doors that opened onto the blinding clarity of the midday sun. Serena followed, her father close behind, and the sound that filled Maya's ears wasn't applause or gasps, but her own breathing, slow, sure, and utterly hers. They didn't look back. The day after the aborted wedding, the headlines started, not on television, not in major papers, but in the shadowy corners of the internet where gossip bloomed quickest. A blog post titled "Runaway Bride at the Grand Orchid: What Really Happened" popped up first, complete with grainy cell phone pictures of Maya standing alone in the aisle. By mid-afternoon, the photos had been reposted, captioned with guesses ranging from cold feet to family feuds. No one outside the three people who knew the truth, Maya, Serena, and her father, could possibly imagine what had driven her to walk away. Maya sat in the quiet of her apartment, her gown sealed away in a garment bag like an artifact from a life she'd decided not to live. She had returned here after the ceremony's collapse, trading the perfume-thick air of the hotel for the stillness of her own walls. Serena was stretched across the sofa, scrolling through her phone with the alert focus of someone tracking a storm. They're already making up stories, she said, showing Maya a headline. Apparently you left Ethan because you're still in love with someone from college. Another one says you discovered he had a gambling problem. Maya didn't even look. Let them write what they want. The truth is too big to be written by strangers. Serena's eyes flicked up. And what about Ethan? He's been calling. Maya's phone sat face down on the coffee table, the missed call notifications stacking in quiet defiance. I'm not ready, she said. Not yet. But she was ready for answers, not the ones she'd imagined in the heat of the moment, at Rosewood Tower, but the kind that came from seeing the shape of the whole thing. That evening, she dressed in jeans and a dark jacket, tied her hair back, and told Serena she'd be out for a few hours. She didn't tell her where she was going. Rosewood Tower looked different at night, the glass reflecting neon from the street signs, the lobby quieter and less guarded. She wasn't there to confront Ethan or Reverend Caleb. She doubted either of them would be foolish enough to meet her now. Instead, she sought the building's maintenance staff. Years ago, her father had taught her something simple but often forgotten. The people who see the most are the ones no one sees. The night janitor, a wiry man in his late 60s, had just finished mopping the marble entry when she approached. She introduced herself by first name only, asked a few questions, and offered him the kind of direct honesty that made people want to speak. Within minutes, he told her more than she expected. Reverend Caleb had been visiting Suite 614 regularly, for months, always with the same request to keep it discreet. Ethan had been there too, sometimes together, sometimes alone, often staying for hours. Didn't seem like church work to me, the man said with a shrug. But I'm paid to mop floors, not ask questions. Her chest tightened. The patterns were older than she thought. This wasn't a single moment of weakness on Ethan's part. It was a web. The janitor lowered his voice before continuing. You didn't hear it from me, but there's a rumor about other young men in that suite. Not just your fella, the Reverend. Well, he's the kind of man who walks like the building belongs to him. People get nervous around that. By the time she left, Maya's mind was less clouded by betrayal and more sharpened by a strange, emerging clarity. She still hurt, there, was no avoiding that, but now the hurt was laced with something heavier, a sense of responsibility. If there were others, then walking away from the wedding wasn't the end of her story. It was the opening scene of a fight she hadn't known she was preparing for. 2 days later, Ethan showed up at her apartment. He looked thinner, his eyes ringed with sleeplessness, his usually impeccable posture folded inward. Please, he said when she cracked the door, just give me 10 minutes. She considered slamming it, but instead, she stepped aside. He stood in the entry like a man unsure of the floor beneath him. I know I can't undo what you saw, he began. But you have to understand, Caleb wasn't just a friend. He found me when I was in a bad place. I owed him. I thought I did anyway. He made me believe I was nothing without him. I didn't know how to get out. You knew how to lie to me, she said, not with anger, but with the cool precision of someone who had already decided not to be convinced. He flinched, but kept going. I didn't want you to know because I didn't want you to see me as weak. But if you think I'm the only one, you're wrong. There are others. He's been doing this for years, and they all keep quiet because he can ruin them. It was the same thread the janitor had hinted at. Hearing it from Ethan didn't soften the betrayal, but it did ignite the flicker of something else. Purpose. So why are you telling me this now? She asked. Because I think you're the only one who could make people believe it, he said. You've always been fearless, and you have nothing left to lose with him. Maya leaned back against the wall, studying him. He was right. About one thing, her public choice to walk away had stripped her of the illusion that silence kept her safe. Everyone already had their version of her story. Now she had the chance to tell the real one. I'll think about it, she said finally, and opened the door in a way that told him the conversation was over. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the city's hum leaking in through the half-open window. She thought of the aisle she hadn't walked, the vows she hadn't spoken, and the truth she had glimpsed in that hotel room. She thought, too, of the others, nameless, voiceless, trapped in the same cycle Ethan had just described. By the time the first pale light of dawn reached her walls, she knew. Walking away from the wedding had saved her. But speaking up could save others. And that, she realized, was far more important than the story people were telling about her now. By the end of that week, Maya was done being a shadow in her own life. The rumors hadn't slowed. If anything, they'd grown teeth. Strangers debated her character online like she was a cautionary tale, speculating about scandals that had never existed. But she no longer cared about correcting lies. She cared about replacing them with the truth. The night before she made her decision public, she sat cross-legged on the living room floor, a cup of tea cooling beside her, sorting through a folder Serena had brought over. It was filled with printed screenshots, handwritten notes, and copies of text messages Ethan had forwarded at her request. They weren't just evidence of betrayal, they were a roadmap of manipulation, each message a thread tying Reverend Caleb's influence to more than one man's undoing. Serena sat opposite her, leaning against the sofa. "You're sure you want to do this? Once you go public, there's no taking it back." Maya looked up. "If I stay quiet, I'm giving him permission to keep going. I walked away from my wedding to protect myself. Now I need to speak to protect others." The next morning, she reached out to an investigative journalist named Alana Price, whose work she'd admired for years. Alana was known for dismantling the kind of public facades that made men like Caleb untouchable. Politicians, CEOs, religious, figures who hid cruelty behind sermons. When they met in a small, windowless office downtown, Alana didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You've got 10 minutes to convince me this isn't just personal vengeance," she said, flipping. "Open a notebook." Maya slid the folder across the desk. "It's not vengeance. It's a pattern. I'm one person who saw the truth by accident. But there are others who've lived it for years and they're too afraid to speak. I'm not." Alana spent the next hour combing through the documents, her pen moving in short, sharp strokes. She asked questions, pointed ones, the kind that made Maya revisit every detail with clarity rather than emotion. By the end, the journalist closed the folder, her expression unreadable. "If this is true, it's going to shake more than one church," she said. "But I'll need more than your word and Ethan's. I'll need corroboration from others." "That's why I came to you," Maya said. "Help me find them." Over the following weeks, Alana worked quietly, reaching out to possible victims, building a network of people who had been watching Caleb from the edges. One by one, the stories emerged. Different details, different timelines, but the same undercurrent of control, secrecy, and shame. Some of the men agreed to speak on record, others allowed their accounts to be used anonymously. When the story finally broke, it wasn't a gossip column. It was a 30-minute televised segment backed by a month's worth of fact-checking, testimonies, and documents. Maya sat in Alana's office with Serena, watching her own face fill the screen. She looked calmer in the interview than she felt, her voice steady as she said, "I didn't walk away from my wedding because I was afraid to commit. I walked away because I refused to commit to a life built on silence. If speaking the truth cost me my reputation, that's a fair trade for protecting someone else's freedom." The reaction was immediate and divided. Some applauded her courage. Others accused her of seeking attention, of destroying a man's reputation out of spite. But the tide turned when two more public figures, former youth leaders from Caleb's congregation, came forward within 48 hours, each with their own set of evidence. The narrative shifted. The conversation was no longer about why Maya had left Ethan, but about how Reverend Caleb had remained protected for so long. 2 weeks later, Caleb was arrested on multiple charges ranging from coercion to misconduct. The arrest footage aired on evening news. The once untouchable man walking down the courthouse steps in handcuffs, his head bowed against the cameras. That night, Ethan showed up at Maya's apartment again, not to ask for her back, but to thank her. "You didn't just save me," he said quietly. "You gave me a way out I didn't think existed." Maya listened, then nodded. "Then make it worth it. Heal. And if you ever see someone else where you once stood, help them find the door." When he left, Serena joined her on the balcony, where the city lights blinked like a field of restless stars. "You know," Serena said, "you could have kept this as just your story, but you turned it into something bigger." Maya leaned against the railing, the cool night air threading through her hair. "It was never just my story. That's what I learned in that hotel room. The betrayal was mine, but the pattern," she gestured out to the dark beyond the street, "that belonged to more people than I could count. If I can break it for even one of them, it was worth every headline." In the weeks that followed, life didn't go back to normal because normal had been an illusion. Instead, it became something quieter, steadier. She went back to work, took long walks in the mornings, started answering calls from strangers who wanted to tell her their own truths. One evening, months later, she found the gown in its garment, bag at the back of her closet. For a moment, she considered donating it. Instead, she kept it, not as a relic of what didn't happen, but as a reminder of what she chose instead. The aisle she didn't walk had led her somewhere else entirely, into a life where her voice mattered more than her image, and where walking away had been the bravest step she'd ever taken.